Keeping it honest.
You are fake news.
Keeping it real.
I want to smoke some pot.
And keeping it libertarian.
I'm a libertarian for life.
These are the Faktertarians.
There's no video of President Trump sucking a ding dong. And so what if there was?
Well, and that's the exact point. What if there was? I don't care who has photos of whom sucking on ding dongs. This is the second voyage of the libertarians, of the Fakertarians, calling out all of the weirdness in the world and keeping people straight. Well, not straight like that. Here's John Hudak.
Hey guys, I'm John Hudak, along with Jeremy Kantorowicz and Brian Hagan. Today we have on Mike Shipley, who's a candidate for LNC Chair that we've had a lot of run-ins with the past. So that should be a fun time.
Yeah, it really should, John. I'm looking forward to it. We've got Mike here right now. Jeremy hanging out with us as well. I think we're in for a really good evening. And, I mean, how have things been in your world there, John?
Pretty good. I mean, quarantine, but things are starting to open back up a little bit, but who knows when any of this is going to go away.
Hey, I know we didn't have this planned, but I just got a Facebook message from, you're never going to believe this.
No.
Sam Coppinger has left us a voice memo. I don't know how this is going to go because Sam's a friend of the page, a friend of the group, and a friend of the show. And Sam, well, he's kind of a mess today, as we all know, because of the Amish situation. I don't know what he has to say here. Sam?
You're all a bunch of pathetic, delusional, selfish idiots with no grip on reality and no care for anyone in the world but yourselves. You don't want to change anything. You don't actually care about kids in cages or innocent people on death row or homelessness or police brutality. You only care about your fucking selves and your own entertainment and self-righteousness. Regardless which camp you belong to, you all need help, and you should consider taking up a new hobby other than political activism, one under which you are the only one affected by your lunacy, rather than billions of desperate, innocent people. Harumph.
Wow.
That was something.
He's really terribly upset.
I didn't know his voice sounded like that.
I didn't either. I've never heard him talk in my life. And there he is. And in all fairness, we have to say he's been crying a lot. And I'm sure there's been a whole lot of sobs and everything. So his voice might be a little shot because he just said that like 2 minutes ago. So, well, I think we should all send a very warm hug out there to Sam Coppinger tonight, whose heart is broken. His heart is breaking and the tears are flowing because he lost his beloved Amash.
Moment of silence.
So you pronounce that?
Press F.
Yeah. Second of silence.
So back into our actual show.
I always thought it was Amish, like the Amish,
like the buggy people.
the buggy people.
All right, so Mike, I'll just start off with this. What inspired you to run for LNC chair?
Well, I'm glad you asked. I think the most important, and I'm a human being, so there are lots of fantastic reasons, and I think we'll be touching on some stuff later in the show that was also part of my calculation. But the primary reason where I felt like, like on the political sort of chessboard, like the tactical benefit right now of someone like me as our chair is that we have this chance to make a new first impression. Progressive Democrats are the people that are the most unhappy right now. Trump's people are loving what they've got. Biden's people are loving what they've got, and progressive Democrats got left ass out. And so they're looking around for things. So, in times past, we might not have been well positioned to compete for progressive voters. But now that we have this awesome new working relationship between left and right libertarians and a whole bottom unity campaign and, caucuses where they can land and feel at home while they get accustomed to, being full-blown capitalist sympathizers like I am, it's a good moment for that. So I decided to go ahead and run.
So you kind of alluded to the LibSoc caucus a bit. How do you feel LibSocs fit into the libertarian movement?
Well, I don't even think it's a question of like, do they fit in? I feel like, historically, the roots of modern libertarianism are grounded in the same theories and the same ideas. So it's really more like having the modern Libertarian Party become accustomed to what those critiques are, how that analysis works, and why it does fit in. So I think the benefit that we bring is that, the mainstream political system, the electoral left and right, they're playing a kind of good cop, bad cop routine, and they're bouncing the general public back and forth. And so depending on which side is losing at any one moment, it's actually a kind of intellectual judo, let us say, that we can kind of show them the rhetorical front that would resonate, with whoever's unhappy at the time. So I think it really strengthens us in a lot of ways.
So a lot of our disagreements in the past have kind of come around 2018 when Matt, I don't know how to pronounce his last name because I do this on like every podcast I'm on where I talk about him. It always looks like Kunal, but I hear it's Kino. Do you have any Kino? Okay. So it was when Matt Kino was running for chair and we had the whole thing where we had the whole thing with us arguing about that. And then he eventually went down the whole road with the tanky thing. Why do you think, since you were close with him at the time, why do you think Matt went down the road to authoritarianism?
So this is helpful to understand just in general, especially for listeners who might not be familiar with all the intricate nuances of left libertarian theory. It's really easy so in the US in particular, most often the word socialism gets associated with the totalitarianism that unfolded in, Soviet Russia and communist China. And that's accurate, right? That allegedly, at least, those revolutions were driven by Marxist theory. What's not immediately obvious, like from a distance, is that Marx's version of communism, like it stated a classless society as its outcome, right? Which would be an anarchist society. So Marxist Leninist theory, which is what started yielding these totalitarian governments, was the idea that a worker state was a necessary precursor to the anarchist society. So the big error in reasoning that Marxist Leninists are committing is thinking that a state would ever wither away. Like that just doesn't happen. They become a new ruling class. So that's the division between Marxist Leninists and anarchists. And I told you that whole story. Hopefully you processed it, because Marxist Leninists are really good at blending in with anarchists and for recruitment purposes. And it's easy to get in their heads sometimes. And that's what happened to Matt. Somebody got in his head, convinced him that a worker state was the pathway to anarchy, and he drank the Kool-Aid.
So when Matt was there, do you think the LibSoc caucus had any sort of tanky problem? And I'm also curious if you think there still is any sort of one, or if that's been solved.
No, so the tanky problem, to the degree that it exists, is because, I shouldn't even say that. Like, it's real. Not so much in our caucus, but in the broader left, because the left in general, especially in U.S. politics, has been completely disenfranchised. So the electoral left is really like a moderate center right authoritarian party. And actual left ideas are just considered embarrassing or fringe. The farthest left we get is Bernie Sanders, and he's still pretty far right to an actual, left-minded person. So left unity is my point. There was this idea that leftists should work together, that they should downplay their differences, kind of like we get with, quote, right unity, right? This idea that ANCAPs should play down their differences with constitutionalists, because it's all going to be magic after, like, we elect a constitutionalist and poof, don't worry, you'll get what you want in the end. And like, it never works out that way, because authority doesn't let go of power once it holds power. And so that is what happened in these historic revolutions. The Marxist-Leninists, the tanky faction ends up murdering the anarchist faction. And it never works out well. So left unity is an incoherent idea, but it's really popular because when you're really short on allies, there's a temptation to work with people that maybe you shouldn't, which is what a lot of those people say about bot immunity. So here we are. You know, so in the LibSoc caucus in particular, and you're asking about like our early time.
Yeah, like when Matt, well, some of it's about when Matt was there, and some of if you think if the problem's been gotten rid of or solved.
Sure. So the vulnerability that left Matt exposed, and I mean, he's responsible for his own mistakes. So whatever, he went down a different path, and I say good riddance. But, you know, in the beginning, a lot of the people that flooded our discussion group were just operating from that standard left unity perspective. So the idea that we would bring the same kind of vigilance, like think about the way that we use the non-aggression principle to like, to do accountability work around Bill Weld, right? Like there's this way that we use principle in this party to like sort of fend off the status that the left unity people were like, oh my gosh, how dare you attack our Marxist-Leninist comrades kind of thing. And there was a lot of that in the beginning. So like, as far as being a tanky problem, like that dynamic existed during that time. And that's how, those people were in the group, and, you know, Matt got exposed to them and everything else. But after a while of us being like, oh my gosh, they literally just converted one of our high profile people in a really embarrassing way. That was pretty problematic. You know, we need to do some work around this. And so we really emphasize bot immunity. And those of us who've been in the party for a while, we spoke out about different ANCAPs that we had worked with over the years, and how, you know, we felt comfortable continuing to do that. And of course that freaks out a lot of people who just run from the project at that point. And we ended up getting it under, I don't want to use the phrase under control because it's a horizontal leaderless caucus, but we got it fixed.
So I think I know the answer to this one, but if Matt were running today, would you support him?
Well, no, because he's an anarchist, or he's not an anarchist today. He's something else. And those ideas are very dangerous, and they don't lead to a world set free. And so that's not a train I want to be on.
Makes sense.
Mike, a question I have is, you know, why do you want this role? I mean, why do you think you're the one that should be selected to sit there as the chair? What do you think separates you apart from, you know, your challengers?
Well, I think we're all in the same boat, right? We're suffering under a giant totalitarian, near totalitarian. I guess it's not on paper totalitarian, but it's a pretty brutal police state, imperial force that is extracting, you know, our wealth and our lives from us every day, right? And I actually I believe that a world set free in our lifetimes, like that's what I signed up for. That's in our statement of principles. And like, I actually want that. And a lot of the misconceptions about this party that are standing in our way have to do with this idea that we're all like Ayn Rand worshiping people that, you know, just want to bulldoze the homeless people to make them go away, or, you know, that we're Republicans who smoke pot when we're not busy marching with tiki torches. And, you know, for those of us who are active in the party, we know that stereotype's not really true. But the trouble is that stereotype's out there and it's standing in our way. I'm sorry, but people are just not flocking to our party to be part of this weird right-wing fringe that they see, or that they think they see. So for me, overcoming that stereotype and getting a new second chance to make a different impression and hopefully open up a different set of floodgates of recruitment, to me, that's a tactically, like, that's a priority. Like, we need to like get past that. And if I'm one of the people who's been organizing in this space for a while, and people perceive me as capable of doing the job, then I feel a sense of, I mean, because you asked, why do you want this? I mean, who the fuck would want this? Wait.
I think that went through my head. Why do you even want the stress? Why do you want the drama, that comes with it?
No, it's more like a sense of duty. You know what I mean? And on the subject of Matt, people were telling me, they were suggesting in 2018, hey, one of us should run. It should be you. And I was like, no, I'm not ready for that. And then Matt happened. And I was like, oh my God, like I left a hole in that space and someone filled it. And that was pretty embarrassing for all of us. It was a bit of a setback. I'm actually pretty grateful and actually surprised that we were able to recover from that, because whoa, right? So when I was thinking about it this time, that was part of my calculation. I feel a sense of duty in these different ways. And, sooner or later, at some point, your career or your activist career, such as it is, may carry you into, deciding to run. And so this was my moment, and here I am. And, whether I win or lose, at least I can look back and I'll be like, no, it's your turn now. You get to run. Nice. But I really do think that it would be good for this party if I won. I wouldn't be running. I'm not just here to be a symbolic libsock, or I'm not just here because people pressured me, or to be the anti-Matt. I really think that would be best for the party. So there's definitely that.
Mike, you mentioned that people aren't flocking to the party for the pot smoking Republican sort of element, or the more fringe on the right over there. But what do we do with those folks, especially the ones who, wear that banner of libertarian quite proudly, but at the same time are threatening individual rights and individual freedoms to make individual choices? For you, for example, they probably think you're some sort of an SJW with your hair. How do you handle that element? What do you say to them?
Wait, can you repeat the question?
Yeah, how do you handle that element of the right?
That element?
That element.
The moderates, the quasi-conservative, maybe still holding a twinge of authoritarian leanings.
I'm talking about the fringe ones, the ones who actually claim to be libertarians. Okay,
the Dave Smith types,
or the people with the
Dave Smith.
towards libertarians. That's what I'm getting at here.
Well,
libertarians.
I'll frame it around bottom unity. Unity is not uniformity, but it is a single issue line on anti-authoritarianism. So to the degree that people aren't really fully in tune with what that means when you apply anti-authoritarianism across the board, then, increasingly, back in the Bill Weld era, it was all you got your non-aggression principle like a sword, and you're just slashing people to death with it if they deviate even a tiny bit, because the statist hordes are invading our party, and that's a problem, right? But now that unity has helped me reframe how I think about it. It doesn't diminish the way that it makes my skin crawl. But it puts me in a headspace where I'm more kind of it's more situational, because I think back to my journey as a liberal Democrat and waking up in this party and being reluctant to let go of the idea of public schools, for instance. That was an idea that I held on to for a while. I thought that if we didn't educate people, then they would be dumb. And if they were dumb, then they wouldn't make smart choices when they voted. And then I finally, no, it's an absurd idea. That's what the schools are doing, right? And so it took me about a year, or maybe 18 months for that critique to really sink in, right? So during that time, would I really want to become the target of my own, animosity? I don't know that I would, right? But I also know that the people around me giving me space to be wrong allowed me to be a successfully retained person. And I guess where I'm going with that is retention. So I'm balancing the idea that if we're actively educating people and in good faith, they're engaging with the ideas, that I'm less prone to kind of attack them than someone that I feel some people dig in their heels, like Matt did that, or even people like I don't know. I'm not going to name a right-wing person, honestly. Like,
Oh, come on, you can.
Actually, you all have been doing a good job fighting your own battles lately. I haven't really had to, so there's not any. You know, if they're trying to change us, then that needs to be dealt with. But a lot of times they're really not. They're just confused, and I'm a lot more okay with that these days.
That's kind of what I was getting at. I wondered what, you'd take as far as, just name calling goes, but what that message would be. So, well, you sold me, Mike. Thank you.
So I'm curious about some of the nuances of your views, because I know there's been a lot of talk that some of the people don't understand libsoc views and things like that. And I mean, I've been guilty of that. I still have some issues with some of them, but I think there are times where people misrepresent them and all that. So should I be able to hire someone to work for me voluntarily if they choose to do so?
So if someone wants to like submit to exploitation, then who am I to stop them? But I think that, if you think about it like any other libertarian idea that we have, we are having to convince them, why is homeschooling or independent schooling, why is that better than a public school? Like, we're teaching them to like voluntarily want that. So for me, the narrative about like worker ownership and the relationship of the worker to the workplace and institutions of financial control and all of those things, like that's ultimately about teaching people why it's better to keep all of your money than to let someone else keep a whole bunch of it and call that freedom, right? Like that's really an educational track more so than like a prohibition is obviously not a libertarian solution. There's not going to be a person who's going to like swoop in and like murder everyone in the workplace if they're not, functioning the way that we think they should, right? So my goal would be to like live in a world where people have the self-respect to say, hey, we supposedly negotiated for our wage, but you actually just told me what my wage was, and we didn't negotiate that, right? Like having the self-respect to actually say that and stand up to it and like decline to participate if that negotiation wasn't real, like that is a big part of it. And that's what the IWW, which is a radical union that rejects state collaboration and operates directly in the workplace to democratize them. That's what the IWW does. That's, in fact, that idea is called class consciousness, when the individuals recognize their own power and decide to actually take it back.
Okay. Like I'm an ANCAP and I wouldn't have any problem with that if it's done voluntarily. I mean, I think we have some different ideas on what is exploitation and what's not, but if people want to make their own choices, I'm good with it. Another one I had, should someone be allowed to rent their house out to someone else in exchange for money?
So this is another one where rent is theft was the famous slogan.
We have some arguments about that.
Right. And, it's not the job of the chair of the party to tell you what you should think about rent or which slogans to get excited about. So there's that. But I made an analogy to like the gas tax on another podcast. I think I'll bring that back. Like when I go to the pump, and I put gas in my car, supposedly I've made a voluntary transaction with Circle K or whatever it is, the Shell station to buy gas. But what's packed into that price that I pay is a whole bunch of taxes, right? So the price of the gas I pay contains a portion of theft, right? But is that transaction really voluntary or not? I'm not voluntarily paying the majority of that portion, but the exchange masks itself as voluntary, right? I got to pick which gas station, right? I got to pick which grade of gasoline. But the portion between the real price and the inflated price is theft. So if the slogan was like gas is theft, you could run around and be like, oh no, I got to pick where I bought my gas. It's totally voluntary, but like that would be false because there's a bunch of theft in that transaction. And it's important to realize that. So that was going on with the rent is theft thing. So first I want to make that like understood. The critique of land titles is about the state controlling the supply of which land is represented by a title and therefore can be traded on the marketplace. So if the state can restrict the supply, then the value is inflated. And the difference between the natural price and the inflated price is that. So the slogan doesn't do a good job of explaining that nuance. So with all of that said, yes, rent is theft in the current marketplace. In a world set free, because we would be experiencing so much prosperity and our housing prices would not be nearly so inflated, the likely outcome is that most people would actually be able to experience ownership and would probably choose to do so. If home ownership is such a part of the American dream, although I'm told, oh, lots of people must love renting because it's such a great deal and that's why there's so much renting. Like, I'm not sure I buy that because, you know, obviously ownership is better than not ownership. That's why property rights are like an important thing, right? And so anyway, my point is, in a world set free, if people still needed short-term housing, like for a vacation, like an Airbnb type thing, of course that's going to still happen. Like it would need to happen. So in that case, then rent doesn't necessarily qualify as theft. So the answer to your question, circling back around, in that case would be yes. Yes, you can.
Okay.
That's actually really, I mean, I've never heard it explained that way. I mean, because you hear, oh, rent is theft, and then that immediately turns off anybody who's, a, more capitalist minded type person. It's like, oh, that's a voluntary transaction. And, but, the way that you kind of explained it actually doesn't sound that much different from even a, capitalist argument. Yeah, without the state, there's going to be, much more opportunity for more housing, different types of housing. There's just so many more options without that restriction and driven up price by the state that people are going to be a lot more free to own, or if they do want to rent, they probably are going to pay a much smaller price than what they're paying now. So it's interesting that it almost sounds the same as the arguments that that a more capitalist person would have about the housing market.
Well, yeah, it's pretty much a standard free market like analysis.
Mm-hmm.
Well, and I think there's just, and John said this up front too, there's such a rush to judgment, I think, on behalf of so many. And I think that goes, not to pull a Trump, but both sides, very good people on both sides. But but really, both sides do have something to do with that. When you're running around screaming, rent is theft, and then the other side is screaming SJW commie or whatever, there's no time for the actual, to get out of the soundbite and the sloganeering, there's no time to get into the heart of the discussion. And that's what I've been finding too, Mike, is when you really get down into that heart, you find so much commonality there.
Yes. Well, I will have to say that I lived through basically an entire year of my life where I woke up in the morning and I spent all day, every day trying to explain that. So the fact that I just was able to boil that down into, like a 2-minute soundbite, product of so much repetition, that I'm really glad to hear someone say, wow, that made sense. Because I remember it being like, those ideas were unfamiliar in a sense to me at first too, because, I'd read about these ideas. I'm like, that makes sense to me, but in the Libertarian Party, that wasn't a priority. So I never really had to find the vocabulary and express it in great detail. So I don't know what I'm saying other than yay.
I mean, I feel like a lot of the problem at the time was people like Matt running around and saying landlords need to be lined up against the wall and stuff like that. I just feel like that kind of cut off a lot of the discourse.
Yeah, I think that he really reveled in people's terror, which is probably a signal of what he would be prone to later. But
Yeah.
I mean, I remember at the time thinking, so this is kind of sad for me because Matt was like a protege. Like I developed him as an activist. He was really good at like getting attention and focusing the conversation in a new place, right? When the conversation tries to snap back to like these old ideas, like Matt would like get attention and make sure that we were talking about something new and different. And that was really helpful at the time. So watching him kind of turn to the dark side, like it was kind of like the Jedi apprentice that I ended up having to like kill, which is really sad. But my point is he showed a lot of promise, and, you know, he was anarchist back in the day. So I don't know if he ever, someone will probably send him this link and be like, Mike Shipley just talked a bunch of shit about you. And, you know, I don't know what to say other than like, I still wish him the best, but, you know, Marxist-Leninism does not work in the Libertarian Party. And I'm not going to go along with like getting stood up against a wall and murdered and told that like I was counter-revolutionary. Like, fuck that.
I think he's really anti-anarchist now from the stuff I've seen. It's a lot of stuff like in favor of the Chinese leadership and like some revisionist North Korea stuff going around now.
All right. Well, I guess when the revolution happens, we'll find out who wins.
The North Korean apologia is just so interesting to me. I have watched people just run circles in their brains trying to explain how they can put those two aspects together and come out looking sane. And it's just maddening to me. It's talk about authoritarianism. And how do you, there's no way that's compatible at all. And it just kick the tankies out. Guillotine for tankies.
Like every historical example that we always have to answer for, and you know, I mean, this is true for all of the ideologies. Like in their pure form, they're always libertarian because people want to be free. Like we're sick of being dominated, and it's been going on for thousands of years. And you know, then there's like the authoritarian perversions of those ideas. So like the modern sort of corporation state that we're living under is allegedly a classical liberal government, right? It grew out of the Constitution. It grew out of the American Revolution. Supposedly, you know, this is our, you know, and it's not. It's a complete perversion of classical liberal ideas that were very anti-authoritarian and, you know, very much against having an entrenched aristocracy. I forgot what my point was, but we have so much more in common with all the ideologies across the bottom. Like that impulse is there. And then I think this was my point, although I'm not sure. There's all these like authoritarian, like mirror images of them is my point. And like historically we see that again and again. And it's the same with like looking at North Korea and trying to see like a classless society in that. Are you kidding me? Like, on what planet is that ever going to wither away? Like their dictator just died, and you know they're going to pick the next one. Like who's going to pick? Apparently, the military leaders. Like, what does that tell you about that structure?
Yeah.
Oh, the daughter, of course, or the niece, or whoever it is. So it's like not only is it not a classless society, but it's also basically. A monarchy, right? Mm-hmm. A hereditary or aristocracy, however you want to put it. Like it's just gross.
So a fantastic place for the Liberty Hangout crew to go and live.
Yeah,
it really is. It sounds like, I mean, if Kim Jong-un was Catholic, Justin would be flying straight there.
Yeah, you know, at least they changed their name finally. That's a good
yeah. They went to like monarchy hangout, and now they're like Catholic hangout or something like that.
Yeah. Wow.
Let's see what they've done.
I mean, they are just isolating everyone at this point with what they're posting over there, and I don't think the Catholics are happy with them. I'm watching this little implosion with great delight.
Oh, they're Trump hangout now.
Oh, are they serious?
Yep, they're Trump hangout now, and it looks like they've got a picture of Trump as their king, and it is not going over well.
I mean, that sounds about right. Like I could have predicted that back when we made the Fakertarians page. Like that was like the whole point. That's why we have that Trump cover photo. It's because of Liberty Hangout, and that's why our logo's like that.
Yeah.
And apparently the death of America has been directly linked to the invention of skinny jeans.
I read that last night, and I tweeted at them, and I just simply said, is this honestly what you sit and think about all day? I mean, I don't know if they're based or if they're trolling at this point, or if they're just absolutely nuts. I can't decide or determine, or if it's a combination of all of those.
Well, I mean, supposedly Justin's sober, like he doesn't drink or do any kind of thing. I don't know what's getting into his head.
Oh, no wonder he's so boring.
How do you decide?
Well, look what happened to Cantwell after he went sober. I mean, he turned into a Nazi.
That is true. I mean, drunken Cantwell was a violent loudmouth, but he wasn't
Right.
a Nazi yet.
I mean, he wasn't. He was just a dumb, babbling idiot who, honestly, some of his stuff was decent. His little writings, good ANCAP for beginners type stuff. But then he stopped doing drugs and then turned into a Nazi. So clearly being sober just messes with you.
So I guess what you're saying there, Jeremy, is kids do drugs so you won't be a Nazi.
There we go.
Is that a good, fair quote? Because
that is that seems to be the takeaway.
what's great is later we will see on Twitter that disgusting little pocket, that slimy, filthy little pocket of, I don't even know who they are. They hang
Frog
out
people?
Oh, the frog people.
Yeah, frog people, the frog people, and they'll be saying, "Did you hear that? Faketarians told kids to do drugs. That's not good."
No.
Do drugs.
And obviously, if you don't want to do drugs, don't do drugs. And if you do drugs, if you stop doing drugs, you're not going to become a Nazi. That's obviously not the case. But
You'll just be really boring. Don't be boring, kids.
Okay, how do we segue out of that?
drugs.
Do some drugs.
The libertarians talked about drugs.
Uh-oh.
No, we did. Obviously, you do you, and there's nothing wrong with sobriety. But we did have a couple of questions from people in the chat. Asked. Anarchists of the past were kind of driven by workers' rights. That's where a lot of it came from. A lot of anarchists now generally are more driven by non-aggression. I guess kind of wondering, is there is capitalism okay for you, Mike? I know you said something about being a capitalist sympathizer earlier, and how does somebody like me or even John who would more identify with capitalism, are you okay with that, or do you abolish that in your perfect world? And if so, if the answer is yes, then how do you go about doing something like that?
So the first great question, there's a lot to unpack there. The first thing I would think is that we're already familiar in sort of right libertarian rhetoric about this focus on like the entrepreneur and why sort of self-sufficiency is a pathway to financial independence and why that's a good thing, and why how that links to property rights and like the fruits of your labor, and why that's a thing to encourage, right? And having the state get involved and make it difficult to start a business such that everyone is sort of, the corporations grow larger and the mom and pops grow smaller and fewer. If you just take out entrepreneur and replace it with worker, you have the same idea, right? So the idea of the worker-owned cooperative is about kind of displacing those vertical structures that are centralizing wealth and replacing them with horizontal ones that preserve the link between the individual and the fruits of their labor, so that the sort of entrepreneurial benefits are distributed to all. And that's a common misconception, because it's not about distributing the resources. It's about distributing the opportunity, and the fact that property is connected to the entrepreneurial spirit, let's say, is just a byproduct. It's like a benefit, and like it's the primary benefit. So there's that. With that said, the whole like historic focus of the worker, it was very like, because remember, these ideas were gaining steam at the end of the 19th century. So it was really classical liberalism gave us the Constitution, and then they had a few years to look at like what was still wrong with that. And then that anti-authoritarian impulse started to generate a new wave of thinking, and that was the anarchism of the late 19th century. So these critiques about the worker, remember that the Industrial Revolution was happening at the same time. So that's why we see these critiques that are focused around the factory worker and, those sort of manufacturing processes that we had before technology existed. So a lot of what is being talked about today is that the worker ownership theory like so needs an upgrade, because technology and digital tools have like changed our relationship with the means of production. Again, like think of a YouTube star. Are they, controlling their own means of production? In a lot of ways, yes, but then there's the platform, and is the platform a product of capitalism, and how does that work? And even think about like ride sharing apps like Uber, like there's such an analysis to be had about whether the intellectual property control that it gives them over the app is really justifiable versus like another kind of app where like, why can't I just log in and drive my car and share rides and get paid for it? Right.
Mhm.
Like, why isn't that happening? Well, because the state used liability and insurance requirements to make it so the central body has to like protect us all from the predators using the ride sharing app to, I don't know. Anyway, it was a scare tactic too. So anyway, I'm rambling because you asked about, what did you ask about?
Let me find out.
Is there, what's the place of the capitalist thinker within that? Right.
Yeah.
I think
so. Yeah. Like, are you okay with, kind of a capitalist society, or should that be abolished? If so, how would you even abolish that? I mean,
okay. So inadvertently, I think I came to the perfect like conclusion, which is that those old labels aren't like as helpful today as they were, 100 or 200 years ago, because the economy is different now. And I think probably now that I'm thinking about it, one of the real benefits of a bottom unity sort of dialogue that's unfolding is that we can synthesize these ideas and think about which ones make sense, especially in the context of things like cryptocurrency and other crypto blockchain technologies, and come up with like something modern that actually works for the future. Like, so I think we need to make the state obsolete. I don't think there's a way to like, prohibit it. Like prohibition isn't the way forward, because that's an authoritarian tactic. So ultimately what we're trying to sort of invite people to do is to take their power back and use it in more ethical ways, and be more vigilant about when they choose to consent, and when they choose to, operate of their own agency. And I think together we'll get there.
So as far as bottom unity goes, are you worried at all about the willingness of libsocs to work with ANCAPs? Because I've had good conversations with libsocs before, but then there's the other ones that will say like, I'm a fascist and all that kind of stuff. So I was just wondering, like, do you run into a lot of that or no?
I mean, a little bit. I don't worry about it in terms of maybe like capital L organizing so much, because I think we can see the benefits within at least like on the electoral landscape. It's a numbers game. And if we can increase in numbers, I think we can all see why that's a good thing. But not everybody wants to join the party.
Right.
And there's lowercase libertarians like across the spectrum. And you're right. There is like a deep distrust of anyone who self-identifies as capitalist. And I think a lot of those language barriers are 98% linguistic. And there's maybe 2% where, I mean, I don't know if I'm assigning correct proportions to those numbers. But there's also like, not just the word capitalism and socialism, but there's also whether we use the word private or personal property, and that can trigger people. And then there's like there's like the conditioning of the fact that we all live under a state, and the way that we do things in that state are constantly being reinforced. Like when I think about housing, or I think about the trades that I make in the marketplace, I'm so accustomed to the way I do things that I make the mistake of using those as points of reference when we're talking about a world set free. I don't know if I'm making sense, but like, so in other words, if I'm a grassroots like ANCAP, and I'm self-identifying as a capitalist, and I'm talking about private property, it's really easy for my speech to carry assumptions that are really built around the existence of a land titling monopoly, for instance, when in actuality, if that land titling monopoly didn't exist, even just the processes, it wouldn't be the same. It wouldn't sound the same. It would be different. And we don't have to be afraid of that. But if I'm like a libsoc person who's not on board with bond immunity and thinks that the Libertarian Party was a Koch-funded front group, and it was a shill group all along, it's never been anything but a giant trick, then I'm going to be very skeptical, and I'm going to be overly sensitive to rhetoric that sounds unfamiliar to me, right? Like I'm not going to want to translate that or do the labor to translate it or even understand why I should. And do I wonder about that? Yeah, because there's a lot more leftists that aren't in this party than that are. And almost all of their figurehead organizers are outside this party. And a lot of them don't trust this project. So there's also that. But I think within the party, like it's growing and it's changing things. And, I hope that it sticks.
Nice.
I mean, like, I didn't do this because it was fun. I did it because I thought that like it would actually help the world be a better place. So I don't know. It's kind of like sometimes I'm just like, you know what? If people can't like get on board with an awesome idea, then I guess we'll have to wait for another person to have an awesome idea in the future. But for me, it makes sense to try to unite anti-authoritarians. So I'm going to stick with that.
So how do you feel about the current crop of libertarian presidential candidates? I mean, I know Justin Amash just left today, and that I feel like that kind of creates like a big hole, because I feel like I don't know exactly who I haven't endorsed anyone or anything except Spike for VP, because Spike for everything. But I feel like there's kind of a lot of uncertainty around who the presidential candidate's going to be right now.
Mm-hmm. Well, I will say that before Amash jumped in, and the two front runners were Vermin and Hornberger, it was kind of interesting because, well, first of all, it was exciting because for the first time, basically the two radical factions were the front runners, and the pragmatists were kind of scrambling to play catch up, and that was kind of cool. It showed that the anti-authoritarian spirit overall had like been snowballing in strength, and that was really cool. And then it was kind of fun because, having those sort of archetypes of each camp be in competition while simultaneously trying to maintain like a bottom unity, like to have that not break down into like open, verbal warfare was kind of interesting. And I'm not sure. Cause like just underneath the surface, there's the fact that just 2 years ago, like we all like hated each other. Right. And so it's really easy for that to come back to the surface. So my point being, when Amash jumped into the race, it was so funny because all of a sudden I was like, you know what? I could totally live with Hornberger. Like compared to Amash, that's like a really like, and I think vice versa, I would rather have either of those two like genuine radical libertarian voices than, a statist constitutionalist sort of, savior from the outside, swoop in and steal our nomination again. Suddenly my point being, it made Hornberger look relatively like desirable by comparison. So that was kind of interesting. And now Amash is gone and we get to go back to being the front runners. And that's cool. It feels comfortable and sort of and healthy. Like I think that in our party, we should be competing for our own ballot line. Like it is the product of our labor, and one of us should be on that ballot line benefiting from its value. So I'm excited to see where that goes.
Do you consider yourself a Vermin Supreme supporter, or are you not taking a side being a chair candidate?
I mean, chair people are supposedly neutral, but I think that went out the window a while ago. I'm definitely willing to work with whoever gets nominated because, this is bigger than, me getting my way. But yeah, I'm a Vermin fan. I think if you look at the history of my organizing and, with the Faktertarians and the Audacious Caucus and all of that, like he fits that mold. And he really was recruited by, actually Des Lindsay did that actual recruitment. But he really embodies what we had been saying. And he's doing a really good job of it. He's really, I think, making us proud and vindicating these ideas that seem so strange, a couple of years ago. Why would you attack respectability? I mean, who wouldn't want? I mean, if you would wear a suit, like that's just normal. Everyone wears a suit. What kind of a person doesn't wear a suit to run for an office? You know what I mean? And like now we see that it can work. It wouldn't work for everybody, but it works for some people, and Vermin's one of them.
I hate suits. I really do. I
get that.
I mean, honestly, John, I kind of screwed up tonight. I'm actually wearing sleeves tonight for some reason. I don't know why that happened. I would much rather never wear sleeves, let alone have to put on some suit and tie just to meet some sort of strange societal norm of like the banking industry. I don't know. There's a conspiracy to be had there somewhere if I were to follow that off, far enough down the line. But I don't know. That's a big thing for me too. I'm going to have to agree with you on that, Mike. I'm not going to be impartial at all. I really like Vermin Supreme. I like what he's doing. I've had a lot of libertarians lob at me, but he has a boot on his head, and I lob back. He's got a boot on his head. I mean, that's something to be proud of, because I think in this day and age, if ever there was a time for a Vermin Supreme, it's got to be now. When we have a president who thinks he's a reality TV show star and doesn't realize that he's actually doing real harm to real people, and people seem to be eating that crap up. So let's put somebody like that out there. Let's talk about ponies. Let's talk about cheesy bread and all of that, and maybe win this reality show that's a freaking election.
Right. And I mean, so when we went to the Philadelphia state party convention, I showed up a day early to, I don't know, we did some touristy stuff. And then Vermin had an appearance. He actually had 2 appearances. And we went to this coffee shop, and it was full of like all of these left anarchists that like think the party is a Coke shill group, like stereotypical blue floppy hair, SJWs that like you would think this party could never appeal to. We're talking fair trade coffee shop, They only sell organic beanies in the little merch area, the whole 9 yards. And it was packed full of people that were just so excited to hear from Furman. He did his presentation. He owned the Libertarian Party in the sense that he openly invited them to join. He led with the fact that the concerns are valid, and I understand what you think about this party. After decades of existence, you have ideas about it, but I promise you, I've been working with them for a while, and they're not what you think. And I really would love it if you all gave them a second chance, because I'm running for this nomination because I believe in it. And they were nodding and smiling, totally buying it. And I can't even get that much traction from a left audience like that, His art and his satire really buys a kind of, it's a ticket into spaces that we will never get into with a purely economic sort of think tank presentation. And that I think is really important to understand how valuable that is.
I personally haven't decided if I'm going to be making an endorsement or anything, but I will say Vermin's definitely on my radar. I'm a big Spike fan too, so that definitely helps out a lot. I've already endorsed Spike for whatever he wants to run for.
That's cool. Yeah, Spike's really. I like Spike too.
Yeah, and I haven't voted for a president since
Nixon.
Nixon. Yes, Nixon. Yeah, that was. Yeah, Nixon. Gosh, I think I last voted in 2008. I think I voted for whoever the Libertarian was at the time, but I haven't voted since then. But it's Vermin definitely appeals to me. It stinks because there's no way he'll ever get debate time with Trump or Biden, despite they'll move the goalposts on polling numbers again to make sure that he doesn't. But I would love to see him up there because I know he could talk circles around whatever sentences those two would fail to complete, and it would be interesting to see him as as somebody that's recognized nationally as running for president. I was going somewhere with it, but I forgot my point.
It happens.
Relatable.
Ponies.
And ponies, or last I saw it was replacing the murder hornets with flying murder ponies, which is even more appealing.
Yeah, I like that idea. I think we could use more flying murder ponies in this world than we could murder hornets. So I welcome the change.
Yes.
Sam must be a murder hornets fan or something. He's pretty pissed.
There we go. Sam loves murder hornets.
He does. He thoroughly loves murder hornets.
So, I did kind of have something to, kind of ask as well. Really, how do we keep extreme factions from trying to either infiltrate or even feel comfortable in the party or even in libertarian circles? There's acknowledgedly tankies on the left, there's alt-righters on the right, and angry Eggman. How do you keep those people out? How do you make them look at let's say a bottom united group of people and go, ew, no, how do you make them look like that? Like angry Stefan, and just look at it and go, ew, I don't want anything to do with it. And they go off and do their own thing and, tweet communist at, literally everybody who is to the left of shooting the homeless for sport. And, how do you keep them out?
Well, I think I don't think there's probably a single magic bullet, but what came to mind when you were formulating the question is kind of looking or just remembering back to what I said earlier about how like the bottom half is full of all these cool ideologies, and then there's like all these really gross like authoritarian versions of them, and like that's like in that case they're like a twisted perversion of ANCAPism, or maybe objectivism in cases, or kind of a blend of that. But you know, I think where I would kind of like, I guess who I would throw under the bus are like the Bill Weld people and the Justin Amash people, because the idea that you're a purist if you question why an authoritarian is like welcome in this space, or like that you're just trying to make it into a debate club if you like say, hey, actually a border wall is not a good idea, right? Like, or, you know, in other words, that idea is so toxic. For one, because it's designed to allow ruling politicians to like swoop in and steal our ballot line. And it's also designed to shame all of the people in the broader bottom who are, you know, and should be really excited about our ideas. Like liberty's a really cool idea. It's really exciting to imagine a world where, you know, my life isn't being ruined by people who think that they know better than I do how to ruin it. And trust me, I know how to ruin my life better than
I'm right there with you.
And, you know, if you get out of my way and stop making the world suck, I think I also know how to live my best life better than they know too. But my point being, I think just honoring our culture of like diversity of thought and freedom of conscience, and like reclaiming the idea that it's okay to be excited about liberty, and to turn that excitement into, you know, retention and education, right? So like the next time, and you know, like with Molyneux and then I think they were more libertarian and then they drifted away. So maybe it's arguable that we were successful in pushing them away. But on the flip side of that pipeline where they are coming in, like it's okay for me to say, no, actually a public school is an indoctrination camp where children are held by force against their will and against their parents' will for 8 hours a day to be, you know, propagandized with a state sanctioned curriculum. Like it's actually okay for me to say that for a former Democratic voter. They are not so fragile that that's going to endanger somebody's plan to install Bill Weld next time. Like that is not a good idea. So I think to answer your question, we just need to like make sure that we're defending that overall, I guess, conversion track that like needs to take place. Like we have to be continuously educating our newcomers, challenging those ideas. If someone's not willing to let go of them, then this party isn't a right fit for them. And it's okay to unrecruit them. You know, but a lot of the rest, if we're patient and kind and loving and compassionate and, you know, and continually presenting the ideas in their beautifulest form, then they will be converted and retained. So that's a good thing.
Okay. Do we have anything else we'd like to talk about before we wrap up?
You know, I just want to say, Mike, followed you around there on the old Facey page and all those areas for quite a while. It's nice to finally talk to you, kind of hear some of your ideas, and good luck on your run.
Thank you.
Yeah, thank you for coming on, especially with some of the fights we've had in the past. Those got a little out of hand, but it was good talking with you.
Yeah, no, you know what? I have been approached many times at these state conventions that I went to, and the person's like, we had a fight on Facebook, but I unblocked you, and I'm so sorry. And I so many times, like, I don't quite remember the specific instance because there were like so many of them. And like, I let go of that a long time ago. Like, I think it would have been more weird if that didn't happen, because that was a shocking transition. So thank you. I'm glad we're like frenemies now. Maybe even actual friends.
Yeah.
Yeah. I'm always new friends too. So this is good. Hug it out, everyone.
Did we just lose Mike?
I think we did lose Mike.
We did right at the very end. Well, you know what?
It was at the end.
Yeah. I think that's exactly what it comes down to. Once Mike is gone, we're gone too. So let's go ahead and ride it out of here, guys. Thanks for joining us. Episode 2, your Fakertarians, on this May 16th, 2020. We'll be back in 2 weeks if I don't die of a drug overdose. Good night.
Good night, everyone.
Bye.
Bye.
This is what we call a fade out. Fading out now.
Oh wait! Don't turn it off yet.
Yeah, I'm not.
We need Angry Tom Woods.
Yeah, pick up Tommy.
Yeah.
There's Uncle Tiny,
Tommy.
the angry one. And with that said and done, I need a drink. Good night.
Good night.
Good night.